When George walks in there, his shirt comes out from under his jacket and gets sucked into the thing. It's so ridiculous and so funny.
Welcome back to the Great American Movie Review, where we review great British movies.
My name is Micaiah.
And I'm Kyle. This is a Movie of the Week style podcast where we take turns picking films and we have a casual discussion about their context and quality. This week I have selected the 1965 Beatles' Help.
And if you want to find us on audio formats, we're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you prefer us in that capacity. But tell us about Help, Kyle.
Yeah, so let's talk about Help. Frankly, I'm gonna describe this the way that IMDb does it because it is a hell of a sentence. Sir Ringo Starr finds himself the human sacrifice target of a cult, and his fellow members of the Beatles must try to protect him from it. That is a apt description of this movie.
There's a famous marketing line used that was kind of playing off of a Hitchcock tagline for one of his films where it was
from Psycho. I think
Psycho, yeah. He's like, don't tell anybody the ending, it's the only one we've got, is kind of what his tagline was. And they made one for this that was like, don't tell anybody the beginning, they wouldn't believe you anyway.
Yeah.
Which I wouldn't, because I started this movie and I was stunned by the fact that there was some Hindu god and a sacrifice happening.
Yeah, I think it's the Hindu god Kali that they are sacrificing a woman to, and then they can't because they find out that they remember that they need some sort of ring to sacrifice somebody to. Yes. This gigantic... You would be able to notice if it was on your finger ring.
Right, before you put the person on the pedestal.
Yes.
But she sent it as fan mail to Ringo?
Yep.
Because she was a Beatles fan, which of course this is the Beatles play themselves. So that's kind of the gist of how this gets going then.
Yep, that is probably the only fan mail that Ringo got in the 60s. Was a gigantic ring.
Love for Ringo.
Yeah,
I mean, he gets a lot of screen time in this movie, so
he does. That's part of the reason why I picked it, was because when I saw this movie first, I was genuinely surprised that Ringo was the best Beatles actor in this one.
Oh yeah, I mean, and he also has to do the most because he's the subject of these of the people trying to get the ring from him / assassinate him.
Yeah, but The Beatles' Help is the second film that the Beatles made with director Richard Lester, or they called him Dick Lester, so I'll refer to him as Dick Lester. After the critical and commercial success of Hard Day's Night in 1964, while the numbers are hard to pin down, it was a hit, despite not being quite as critically acclaimed as their previous film. This is also the last time that the Beatles would make a narrative feature that they would star in. Yellow Submarine was animated and only featured their voices in a limited capacity. So I picked this film particularly because of, obviously, a musical and 1960s, but also I wanted to pick this film because I know that both of us love the Beatles quite a bit. So discussing...
Yeah, I'm no expert or anything. I couldn't break down chronology and all of that stuff. But I mean, I've heard pretty much all of their songs quite a bit.
Yeah.
So, I have Three Cool Cats stuck in my head almost every other day. So that's kind of already a deep cut there. But if that's kind of where I'm at with it. I'm not like a Beatles historian, but yeah, I do definitely.
I think that's fair.
I very much like the Beatles.
I'll say that Help specifically, and specifically their music, came between that Beatles mania type of era where it was 1963 and 64 where they were the biggest thing on earth, and they were kind of moving towards kind of a Sgt. Pepper's or a studio band
And then White Album, where they didn't even really record them all
and the
together.
White Album, where correct. And you can also tell in this movie specifically, they were trying to, specifically George Harrison was picking up on the Indian kind of nature of his music.
This is apparently where somebody gave him something about Hinduism on this set because it's such a prominent part of this movie, and that kind of sent him down that path, which is super interesting. Just his whole like life seemed to change after that.
Right. They were very impressionable boys at that time because they were like,
oh sure,
they were early to mid 20s in the early 60s.
Right.
So seeing them change and mold from 63 to 65 at this time was really cool. And if nothing else, I'm just really glad that these movies exist. Hard Day's Night is just a genuinely good movie.
It really is.
I'm really glad that this movie and that movie and like Yellow Submarine and even Magical Mystery Tour exist.
With the Bee Gees.
Yeah, exactly. I'm really just glad that these exist because we can look on them as like the Beatles were changing in their time.
Yeah, there's such a novelty in kind of like the unique place that they hold. I mean, us saying we're Beatles fans, that's like, I don't know, duh, most people are. They're one of, if not the most popular band of all time and one of the most influential. So like, there's no really question about that. So nothing big to say there, but it is in that kind of way though. It's incredible that they had so much and development and change when they were only really a band for like what, 9 years?
Yeah. So, I think it was, the late 50s, early 60s is when like all four of them were together. Cause the late 50s they had Pete Best and Ringo was the last one to join them. But they were still just teenagers when they met. And man, getting all these musical geniuses and I've already, made fun of Ringo this episode, but Ringo is one of my favorite drummers because he was the human metronome. Man could keep a beat.
Yeah.
And he was also just the glue of the band. He was the guy who didn't quit, and even when he did quit, all the rest of the Beatles were like, "Oh, crap. Well, we kind of need this guy."
Right.
So they grabbed him back, and that was the White Album where he quit, but that was only 2 songs. And
right.
I don't know if you know this, but there are two songs by the Beatles where Ringo is not the main drummer.
I knew this, but I don't remember which ones.
Yeah, it's the first 2 songs of the White Album. So back in the USSR and Dear Prudence, it was it was Paul.
Paul was drumming.
And Paul kept a beat as well. So it's possible Ringo wasn't the best drummer on the Beatles, but man, was he one of the best drummers on the planet at the time. So there's no doubting his musical significance when it comes to the Beatles.
Like, people always poke at Ringo, but like everything that I hear, even from like the Beatles perspective, I'm a big fan of Wham, unironic, big massive Wham fan, and a lot of people kind of poke at Andrew Ridgeley in like it was kind of just George Michael the whole time, which is not true. Like Wham would not exist without Andrew Ridgeley at all. There's a reason George Michael went on and had a solo career that he did, but there is something to that person that really holds a band together, and that really seems like what Ringo was in the Beatles. So it's cool seeing that he gets so like featured in a film like this, which is one of their only like 2 films that they actually like starred in. So
yeah. And that's why I picked this, is because it focuses on Ringo, and somehow Ringo is the best actor in this one. Because all the rest of them, I don't love their characters. Because
they're not really much characters either.
No, they're not characters. They're just
they're playing themselves, but very high.
Right. Yeah, most of the time. Yeah. But also they're playing themselves like just going through the plot.
Yeah, no, for sure. And this movie is absolutely absurd. This is like just a ridiculous, weird, goofy British 1960s comedy with some musical
A play
interludes.
on the Marx Brothers, and somehow it feels like an influence for Monty Python. Like
Yeah,
if you
it
watch this
has that
movie,
DNA.
yeah, if you watch this movie and Monty Python like directly after it, you would be like, oh, so the Beatles were parodying Monty Python. But no, this came
Right.
4 years before Monty Python. So
That's really just the British style of humor that was,
yeah,
that
that
just
kind
kind of
of
embodies that to some extent.
yeah, that like Three Stooges slapstick, but like the British
Yeah. Also just
poshness.
like, yeah, full of visual gags too. Like immediately, I love when you first see the Beatles and they walk into their four, like right next to each other townhomes is what it looks like. And then,
It's all
or
the same room.
apartments, or yeah, but then they open it up and it's one big room with four doors and the room's divided by like four different colors. Just
And
across.
John lives in a pit somehow.
John lives in a pit. And by the way, we talked about it last week when we were talking about this one being the pick for this week. And it was John who was going to play Gollum. And I think Ringo was going to play Gandalf.
Oh, they weren't playing the Hobbits. They were playing.
Or is Paul playing Gandalf? I can't remember, but or is George? Maybe it was one of the other ones going to play Gandalf, but two of them were going to be Frodo and Sam, and then you
I
had
could see
Gandalf.
George as Gandalf.
Yeah, and Stanley Kubrick was actually involved with that.
Oh my God.
To make that even weirder.
No. To make it more awesome, I think you mean.
Right. I just had to bring that back up because I just thought you were right about the whole, like, it could well be John that's Gollum when you said that last week.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
So-
I see Paul as a Frodo as well.
But yeah, I think Paul was Frodo.
No, John was
there.
such a goober. Yeah, he would
Yeah.
make a perfect Gollum.
So it was funny though, like I was like, is that a pit? And then John like hops in it and his bed's down there. So and then there's just a lot of like really funny gags just even within that like apartment. Like there's a weird vending machine with oranges that they use for defensive tactics. There's a really funny thing where where Ringo gets out of bed to talk to John and he like falls on the floor to like go crawl over to him. And then John looks at him and he goes, "Why are you on the floor?" And Ringo goes, "I was tired." and then it keeps going. It
They
gets
just
even better.
captured that. That wasn't scripted. That just happened.
And then it gets even better though, because then Ringo needs to communicate something to John or to Paul, there's George's room in between, like his little strip. But so John then pulls out a phone and calls John, or I keep saying John calls John. John calls Paul, and Paul picks up the phone, and then John holds up an alarm clock to the phone to wake
This
up
plays
Paul,
like a
who's
Bible
in the
story.
same room.
Paul calls John. John calls.
Right. It's just so absurd and ridiculous, and this movie is just full of stuff like that, and I had me cracking up the whole time.
Yeah.
Hard Day's Night is a better film. It just is. It really captured a certain quality to the Beatles and just heightened kind of what they were about while humanizing them in a similar way. This one
They also had more to do with it. You felt
Yeah.
you felt that they had more say in what was going on at the time.
Right.
Whereas this feels like Richard Lester's take on like slapstick British comedy.
Yeah.
Where the Beatles just happened to be there. But I love that the Beatles just happened to be there.
Which the sentiment from the Beatles over the years about this has kind of been that they felt secondary in their own film. But also, John said at one point that they were so high the whole time that maybe that they might not have been as disconnected from it if they weren't just like stoned the whole time. So, which is the least surprising piece of information to learn about this movie after watching it, is that they were all high.
Yeah.
So, it's like, yeah, it's very clear that that was the case here. Yeah. It's just like an absurd, just the whole premise. It's the 60s. It's leaning on stereotypes, like cultural stereotypes that are not great. Like just these Hindu people living in a cave and sacrificing people. But
What's funny to me is very few of them are actually Indian.
Right. That's that other thing. Like there's some like brown face going on here.
Yeah.
So also be aware of that if you're watching it and that's something that you're highly sensitive to. It is a product of its time and not always in good ways. A lot of the times are good ways, like the weird comedy and just like the whole tone of this thing. Yeah, it's a complicated thing for sure.
Yeah.
But in this case, it is presenting them as just people trying to like get this sacrifice, but to the point, which this is it is a funny premise though, to the point where they're like they travel to the UK and to track down the Beatles because they know one of them at least has the ring, because they watch
their
the
base is in the
music
Bahamas, video. I guess, because
well,
their temple is.
I thought they
the
said
Bahamas.
that they set up a new base. They set up a new temple in the Bahamas
and
to lay the trap. That was what they said. Right.
All right, so, yeah, but where's but where's the base that they're throwing darts at the projector of them watching Help?
I think that's probably just somewhere where they practice. Where do they practice Hinduism?
Hinduism, specifically southern India.
Okay, well then maybe it's probably in India. But yeah, like they're just watching them on a projector and they're watching the music video for Help. There's a lot of like just like this movie is now a music video all of a sudden, which I would mind more, except I like the Beatles music and the tone of this movie is so like, you know, it is what it is. So I just was like, I'm into this, you know, each time that a new song played and it was just playing a music video all of a sudden.
Yeah, it is basically like a British version or a 1960s British version of like VH1, where just every 5 minutes there was just a random music video where none of the music had anything to do with the plot of the movie.
Not at all.
But I don't mind
it
a little bit because it's good music. So
Yeah, I mean, the original title for this was 8 Arms to Hold You, but they changed it to Help once they had Help and they realized that it looked like once John had written Help is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, this is a better fit for like what we're trying to do with the movie here. But that's kind of always been like a interesting little bit of trivia.
But also, it's catchier, and I think the tagline on the poster is "Help is on the way." So
right, and it's catchier.
It's
for
helping
sure.
Ringo. So
I just know that like Ticket to Ride was famously printed on like from the major motion picture 8 Arms to Hold You, like the original printings of like those first couple singles still credited the film as 8 Arms to Hold You. So let's see, what do I have next?
What are your notes on this? What did you write down?
I just kind of wrote down
Help.
I wrote down gags that I liked. Like if I liked a gag, I didn't want to forget it. There's a great just like sequence of they try to get the ring from Ringo the first time, and then it says, and then they try
about the scientist.
Well,
oh please.
They go to a scientist to try to get the ring off.
I think his name is Professor Foot or something like that.
Yeah, they keep trying different ways to do it, and the scientist tries various ways himself. And the final one that he tries is like a super like weird vibrating magnet thing where it like would shake it off of his body because of like the vibrations and everything, which everything else comes off of his body except for the ring because it's just like impossible to take off. So even after he knows that they're trying to kill him.
And he's just got like a gigantic laser and what's his name? Algernon, who's played by the guy who plays Veruca Salt's father and Willy Wonka in the Willy Wonka. I knew I recognized him. Chocolate Factory.
Yeah. I knew I recognized that guy, but I couldn't place him.
I mean, it was also like this was also like 6-7 years before that. So but
right.
I guess they would have been just casually just British actors of the time. So, but man, they are a weird duo.
Yeah. What was their motivations? What were their motivations going on here to try to like?
I think Professor Foot is genuinely just trying to take over the world any means possible. Just mad scientist level.
It is like that. Okay, I wasn't like I was like, what's his end goal here? Why does this one thing matter so much? It doesn't really make sense, but
Yeah.
it gives another person trying to like capture or kill Ringo in the movie.
Yeah.
So
That's genuinely it. It's just a guy who's there to foil the cultist plot at any turn, essentially.
to accidentally
To
foil
accidentally
it.
do that, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, to pursue the same thing basically, but for his own
I
gain.
think one of my favorite shots is Algernon and Professor Foot come in. Professor Foot has like a Walther PPK or something like that, and he shoots like one of the cultists, and then he like a split second after shooting one of the cultists, like looks at the gun, and he's confused
Oh yeah, yeah.
as like, what? It shot bullets?
Right. Right. There's so many just like little gags like that are
Yeah.
just so funny.
It's funny to me that most of the actors outside the Beatles do a much better job in this movie than the Beatles.
Well, the
do.
rest of them are professional actors, though.
Correct.
You know,
Yeah.
the Beatles are not. They're just not. They're living up to they're playing into their personas essentially.
Except for
But,
Ringo, who has some of the most unironically funniest just takes in this movie.
Oh yeah, like I love the way that he just kind of like looks around and is just like kind of worried the whole time, and everybody else is just like not really that worried.
Or he gets the red paint spilt on him like in their home, and he just goes like,
Right, right. But there's like it goes so after the first attempt by the Hindu cult, they there's like, and then they tried like 5 more times to do it, and then it goes one and it goes to the next one, and it just keeps cutting to different ones. There's one where he's like in a mailbox and he like tries to like rip the ring off his hand from the mailbox, and then the funniest one though is in the bathroom with the air dryers.
yeah.
And Ringo's just he's just like going up to like dry his hands, and then
And his entire sleeve, his entire sleeve just flies into the air dryer.
Yeah, and I think it was it was John or Paul in there with him at
It was
first,
Paul.
but yeah, the other pieces of clothing just start flying off, and then when George walks in there, his shirt comes out from under his jacket and gets sucked into the thing. It's so ridiculous and
Yeah.
so funny. Like so much of this movie just had me dying. Like I wasn't sure what I was going to expect from this, you know. I didn't realize it would be quite like this, and I'm very happy that
pure
it is.
unadulterated like absurdism is basically this movie.
Yeah, I didn't own this, but I will be owning this now. Like
Yeah.
I will be buying this because I want to just put this on every once.
I'm gonna make the
it's
point
just so much fun
because like we talked about Ishtar and that kind of comedy.
Yeah,
But if it had gone full absurdism, it would have been a lot
Right.
funnier. But
Yes.
this feels like what that should have been like.
right. This is kind of an aimless film.
Yeah.
Like so much of it is just designed around the fact that the Beatles wanted to take a couple vacations, one to the Alps and one to the Bahamas.
Yeah.
So they
And for
picked those locations because they hadn't been
For
there.
some reason, they're just like, oh, we've got to finish our album. And they go to Stonehenge, where they're covered by an entire battalion from the army.
Right. It doesn't make any sense. Very 60s though.
Yeah.
Just I love 60s music videos and 60s comedies like this because they're just like they're willing to just be that, you know, just be ridiculous. The closest thing I could think of like in terms of like modern films, because we don't really get a lot of absurd comedies like this anymore, but it would be something like Wet Hot American Summer or the other one that same team did, They Came Together. It's like stuff like that. I don't know if you've seen either of those.
I've seen neither of those.
Yeah, well, they've got this kind of sensibility, this kind of just like absurd. We're just doing weird, goofy stuff for the sake of doing.
No,
weird,
we've talked
goofy
about
stuff.
Top Secret before, but this is essentially like the British 60s version
Yeah.
of Airplane or Top Secret.
Right. It's that those still feel a little bit more intentioned in some way or another, whereas this just kind of like meanders around from like place to place.
Less aimless, more
Right.
based on gags. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. So like I feel like the gags here, there are some like very much like the air dryer thing where it's just a simple gag concept just worked into the movie somehow. But then there a lot of just the humor is just the way that the characters just react and respond to things. Like in a less intentional way, but still like genuinely funny. It feels very
Given the fact that the Beatles were so high, those were genuine, probably.
right. Like I do feel like in the Beatles stuff, you do get a lot of their real personalities in there, especially when they're doing like the musical moments and stuff like that, where they're just kind of being silly. I think I always liked that about the Beatles and kind of the way they present themselves.
I don't know why, but the first time I saw the shot of it's what I assume is a camera pointed down on Paul's bass. I don't know if you remember this. It's from the Stonehenge music video, but
Okay.
there's a shot that is looking down Paul's bass as he's playing it, but that lives rent free in my head.
Yeah.
It is an amazing shot for the 60s. And
Oh yeah.
I watched a remastered version of this, so keep that in mind.
Same.
But
I did too.
man, is that an amazing shot.
There are some really great, just like artistically done shots in here.
Yeah.
Especially in the music video sequences, I will say there's like a little extra oomph in all of those, just because it's literally a music video that you can repackage and play on TV later, independently of anything that happens in this film.
Yeah.
So,
which was the goal of this.
right.
I mean, yeah.
This was made to coincide and build the hype around the album. This movie was a hit for its time, but it really didn't matter if this movie made money or not, because it was just like adding to the full steam ahead thing. That,
yeah, the Help album was going to sell records
no matter
regardless.
what.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really more marketing than anything, but they managed to make something still really fun and I think pretty unique in doing so. But yeah, you said you picked this because it's a musical, which it is.
It is technically correct.
There's
the best
music
kind
that
of
is sung
correct.
throughout the film. Yeah, there's like 8 or so songs that they sing, which about an album's worth of songs that they sing throughout the film.
Yeah.
So,
of course,
but,
the biggest hit, or the most influential hit yesterday on the Help album is nowhere near this. So
no, it's not in it. No.
There were like 6 songs that weren't in the movie, but were in the album.
Right.
So
yeah, which is usually how it goes with these kind of things. Like even when you take like stage plays and adapt them to film, they usually cut back a couple of the songs because there's no way you can fit the whole soundtrack in there when you're dealing with a more condensed thing.
Yeah, but I'm sure they tried.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So in this capacity, it's more of a jukebox musical, but it's not even quite that, because for those who don't know, jukebox musical is just where you're singing known songs, like not original songs for the movie. So I think Moulin Rouge is probably the most famous recent example of that, but they were more prominent back in the day. Even Singing in the Rain, to some extent, is technically that, because those songs were not written for the movie, not most of them. So
I think that's fair.
But this is more all the music in here is diegetic. For those who don't know what diegetic means, diegetic is just music that is from the movie. Like if there's like a radio playing music in the movie, then that's diegetic. If it's just music in the background that's not really there, but it's just the movie having music playing as part of the scene, then that's non-diegetic. So this is all diegetic, so it's all just the band singing whenever there's music in the film. But then, like I said specifically, it doesn't like incorporate any musical elements into the plot other than the fact that they're the Beatles and they're recording an album.
I mean, there is a score though that was George Martin, and I think Ken Thorne was the musical editor. So there was, and kind of feel like it's underrated for this movie. It does what it's supposed to do, where it's not upstaging the Beatles songs. Obviously, you can't upstage the Beatles songs in the Beatles movie, but specifically in like some of the landscaping like scenes, it goes very much under the radar. that I kind of like.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. I like the way they incorporate certain Beatles songs just like in the restaurant. They have the band playing. I forget which song they're playing, but they're playing a Beatles song just in the background, in their different types of instruments that, you know, you would later hear more so in George Harrison. I guess he liked it there, hearing it play their songs. But then also you do get, they use a lot of classical music pieces as well, like more than you'd think, that are prominently part of the movie. One of them particularly as a big gag, or they're all kind of used as a gag.
Yeah, Ode to Joy.
Yeah, where they're just
they're just all singing the German Ode to Joy, and it reminds me of a fish called Wanda.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember the scene, or I assume you do. But it's
yes, like, that's one of my favorite comedies.
If it weren't for us, you would all be speaking German right now, and it's like, well, they kind of were. Just give it 20 years.
Yeah. But yeah, this Ringo falls into 3 trapdoors in this movie, and the first one he falls in, or I don't know if it's the first one or not. Either way, one of them, the one in the bar that he falls into, there's like a tiger.
Yeah, no, the first one he was literally like chainsaw, his drum set was like chainsawed into the ground.
Yeah, that's where they kind of cleverly still incorporate the music, because they're in the recording studio, and then they play the whole song. At the end of the song, they're like, manager, whoever, publisher, like, whoever's there,
what's that buzzing sound?
Yeah, we got to record it again. I'm hearing a buzzing sound. And they're like, is that you with the buzzing sound? No, not me. Is it you?
I knew it was Ringo.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then you just around Ringo's whole drum set is just the saw is just cutting around it.
Just again, one of the unironically funny things from Ringo when he gets saved by the girl the first time. He just goes, she goes, run, and then he goes, okay, but you'll tell me at the first possible sign or first possible moment what you're doing, right? And it's just
the lines just so frequently don't make sense in a way that's like kind of just playing against what he should be thinking or saying in a moment.
But I have to imagine that it wasn't in the script, but Ringo said that anyway.
I imagine there's a number of those things, and I also think that in some of the intention of what they were going for, that's also part of it too.
Yeah,
Not once again, not to bring up more of different things, but if anybody watched like the Wet Hot American Summer show, the first show, not the second show that they did, but the first day of camp, then there's the scene where Jason Schwartzman, they find like a bunch of acid in the woods, and he pulls out he's like, is it acid? And he like dips in his fingers and eats the acid. He goes, oh yep, it's acid. And then by the time he's leaving, he's like pulls out a spoon and is like eating it as he's going. It just gets more ridiculous and more ridiculous. So it's like, if you like that kind of stuff, then this movie, yeah, like we've said a bunch, is just full of it.
Yeah, that's like,
it's just so silly.
What is it? The Hot Fuzz shot where they find the disarmed like sea mine, and so they're just like, yep, it's deactivated, and they just keep like hitting it to make sure it's deactivated. Yeah,
absolutely. But yeah, there's one of the attempts to get the ring off of Rinko. One of the attempts was using this like serum. Using the serum that would like shrink his finger, but they accidentally stab Paul in the leg with it, and then you get like the adventures of,
well, that's not good.
Right? You just get like the adventures of Paul on the floor.
Yeah, the adventures of Paul in the ashtray.
Yeah, I forgot what they like literally put up text on screen. Like with the tiger thing, I literally pointed and I was like, ha, a tiger. And then it popped up with the words, a tiger.
A tiger, yeah.
I was like, oh, it got what I was thinking.
Yeah, so. That's the most comedically funny thing was the just the random like subtitles that they would put in.
Yeah, the text that they'd put on, like the labels for things. Yeah. No, that was, it was funny every time they did that. But yeah, so eventually they go to the Alps because let's go to the Alps. And I have to say, I want whatever those little, I've never seen those like ski bikes before is what it looked like.
Yeah.
Those things, I want those. I want that. But yeah, they spend some time, and the whole time throughout the movie, they're just being tracked by the Hindu group. And there's another really there's another really hilarious shot or just thing that goes on where like in the Alps in the snow, they like disguise themselves as snowmen by wearing little snowmen costumes.
Yeah.
Just like chasing them around. It's so funny to me. But yeah, they perform a music video there, and
they're playing a game of like curling.
Yeah, they play curling.
They play curling, and then the professor comes in with a curling stone that's like a bomb, and he lights it on fire, hands it to George, and then
right. But it doesn't work at first.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's just like very cartoony.
Yep.
Where you literally just put like a wick in a thing and then say it's a bomb all of a sudden, you know?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what you were holding before. Suddenly you reveal that there's a wick and it's going down and it's getting closer to the or there's a fuse. I mean, whatever. But yeah, it's just ridiculous. But there's a point where they're like in orchestration outfits too, and George like clasps his cymbals, and then he like just takes a big bite out of it.
Yeah.
Like, did you see that?
Yeah.
I was like, he just took a bite out of a cymbal. There's just a big bite mark out of it. So, and then let's see, where else do they go? They end up being like hidden in like this giant manor. I don't know exactly what it was.
Buckingham Palace, literally.
Oh, they're in Buckingham Palace?
Yes.
Okay. And the guys are trying to get him with like the spray hose.
Like they try to feed in gas, but they see the hose, so they like feed it to the outside instead.
Right, and then the guys pass out, and the doctor turns around and goes, "Well, there goes my knighthood." Or he says it so nonchalantly, though. It's just like, well, there goes my knighthood. But so the final part of the film takes place when they go to the Bahamas now, another vacation destination for them. And just more of the same kind of goofy stuff just going on, more music videos. And that my favorite gag in this whole section, and quite possibly the whole movie, is when you get the Beatles land in the airplane, the Pan Am plane. They pull up the whole like stairs to like get them to like walk down off the runway, because it's Bahamas. You're not gonna have like a huge airport there with like the terminals and the connectors and everything. So They have the stairs. But then the police detective, the Scotland Yard guy, who I guess also comes to the Bahamas to help. He flew separately.
The name of the movie.
Oh yeah, he flew separately in this tiny plane.
Yep.
And they still bring out the stairs that like tower over the top of the plane, but then instead of like trying to push it away, he like worms his way out of the plane and gets on top of the stairs and goes down the stairs. That might be my favorite. He goes down the stairs
and meets like 4 members of the, I guess, Bahaman.
And they just keep like rotating around. Bohemian?
The Bohemian, the Bohemian army? No, it's 4 members of the Bahamen. They let the dogs out.
No, they keep rotating though.
Yeah, they keep rotating and keep like shaking hands.
Thing. Yeah. Yeah, it's that classic extra thing that you have to do when you have like a small cast and you need to keep like showing different people. But
that fits the movie so well. Somehow.
Right, it just makes a joke out of it. It's so funny because you keep shaking their hands over and over.
Yep.
So yeah, that's like, I don't know. Do you have any favorite gags that you remember from the film?
I don't know, but one that's sticking out to me for some reason is they're all on bikes going to the I think it was the end sequence, and for some reason, like I think it's George, his bike falls on the ground, and so he has to go pick it back up for some reason.
Right.
I think that's it. Yeah.
It's there's so many little things. This movie is endlessly rewatchable, I think, because it's just all the gags are, or so many of the gags are so small that
Yeah.
you could just see it, or even just like a weird look that somebody gave, maybe even not acting, maybe looking somewhere off camera. I don't know what caused them to make a certain face at a random time, but that kind of stuff is in this movie all over the
Honestly,
place.
that
Just
or the woman who keeps saving Ringo, I think her name is Ami.
right, yeah, she keeps showing up.
She shows up all in pink to thwart the professor's plans the first time, and she comes in with like a pistol that's also pink for some
Yeah.
reason. She has a pink pistol.
There's a point where they jump in the water to escape to it. And then once they're in the water, and goes, I can't swim.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like, it's just, yeah, it's just so funny throughout. Like, yeah. And as a, if I like hated the Beatles, then this movie would not be for me. I wouldn't think, because it's so much of it is just them.
Yeah. Oddly enough, though, it doesn't have a lot of the Beatles outside of like
True.
the Buckingham Palace scene, which is like
True. It's
the
just a bunch of
most
fun
that the
slapstick.
Beatles, characters get is just their thing. But no, yeah, it's mostly slapstick surrounding the Beatles, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, I think that I do think most anybody can enjoy this unless you hate the Beatles. So it's just a good time. It's just fun. It's not like it's a stupid, weird, absurd comedy starring the Beatles. That's what this is.
Yeah.
And
It's high production value for no reason at all.
right, it's literally just because it's
Slapstick
the
comedy.
Beatles and they want them to look good on screen. They filmed A Hard Day's Night in black and white, and they made a big deal about having filmed this one in color.
Yeah.
So, because I mean, a lot of the Beatles footage at the time was in black and white, just based on how TVs were most common,
Especially in the UK at the time.
Right.
Anything that wasn't Hollywood, really.
Yeah. Black and white was still pretty predominant. So, color film was a lot more expensive still back then. It always has been. So, but yeah, any other things that you want to talk about with the movie overall?
No, I think we mostly just laughed through this episode, I would say.
Honestly, because that's what the movie is, though. Like, it wasn't. This is definitely not our most coherent episode that we've done, but I definitely. I mean, yeah, I have a good time just thinking about it. Even it's just a really funny, fun time to watch this. So, yeah, but I guess we'll move into scoring then.
Yep.
Yeah, so the way our scoring system works, as every week I go over this, it's 0 for not good, 1 is good, 2 is great. We just keep it simple like that. That gives us kind of some flexibility for what the show's rating is. It doesn't fit necessarily our own individual ratings, but we go over 10 different categories and put those points in to make it a total of best out of 20. But as usual, our first category is writing.
Oddly enough, I think it is a 0, unfortunately. Yeah. But I will say some of the dialogue for like the Buckingham Palace scene and some of the dialogue like for the first like 20 minutes is really good. But
yeah,
it's too little, I would say.
It's really the plot.
Yeah, and it jumps around way too much.
It's just not really there, and also, the incorporation of the music in the storytelling is not very cohesive either.
Yeah.
So the movie feels like what it is, an excuse to put the Beatles on screen and have them sing songs and make a little extra money on the side. So.
No, I could.
It is what you think it is. But
I haven't seen the script, but I have to imagine that in the script there are just random points in the script where it just goes and Beatles song. So
right.
they didn't really write around it, or they didn't really like try to flow into like having the Beatles song be there. So yeah,
right.
I think a 0 is fair.
I think a 0 is fair. I also think this is where like we talk about it, where our system doesn't even reflect how we would necessarily rate things, because frankly, the writing here not being the standout not being that great, it doesn't matter for this movie. It like that doesn't really interfere with my enjoyability of it. It's just technically, I would say that's definitely not something the movie does well. So.
Yeah.
Our next category is world building. I'm tempted to give it a 1 with world building, even though there's just kind of like,
so am I.
It's really stupid.
I think it's mostly for the locales that they shot on.
The locales, I mean, that's one thing, but it's also, I think it works to have the Beatles playing themselves for one, because then it makes sense why they're doing different things. Even if it's just for an excuse to go to the Alps, the Beatles would be somebody who would have an excuse to go to the Alps and shoot a music video, So it feels still like authentic, even though it is that. But I think that within the gags and the comedy, they build a very specific version of like just this of London and the different places they go, where like they all live together in this one kind of thing. Like the set design in certain areas is pretty inspired for what it is, and the shops that they go to all have their specific things, and all the comedy, as much as it is random, fits together pretty cohesively too. So I'm tempted to go with a 1 here.
Yeah, I think a 1 is fair.
Okay. So next category is characters. I mean, the Beatles are just playing high versions of themselves.
I still think it is a 0 because I don't think there's anything with the characters of the Beatles. They're just kind of there, and everyone else is just the one dimension of like the cultist trying to kill Ringo,
right,
and the woman trying to save Ringo for reasons, and the professor and the Igor equivalent just doing their thing.
Yeah, the characters aren't great, and like we said already, a lot of them are founded in stereotypes in a way that I don't think is the best. But the characters, I'd say 0, just because the Beatles characters don't even feel like, as much as they're playing themselves, they're not really characters. Even like they don't have any story or anything going on with them outside of Ringo. But even then,
if there were a few more scenes, like the jewelers scene,
right,
where you can just see George in the background like stealing jewels for some reason.
yeah
And the Buckingham Palace scene, if it's mostly the Beatles like doing their thing, I could easily be swayed. But
it's spread a little thin. So characters is a 0 then. All right, next category is directing.
I'm honestly torn on this one.
I'd give directing a 1. I think Richard Lester, he does a good job. Richard Lester's actually made some pretty big films. He made the less popular version of Superman 2, which was the original version, because people tend to like the Donner cut more. But
I just like the sentence less popular version of Superman 2. Like multiple versions of one movie.
right. But I mean, he did the Three Musketeers and Four Musketeers in the 70s.
Oh, the 70s movie, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had some, pretty well-regarded and, pretty famous films for the time. So he wasn't just like, I'm doing a Beatles film and, that's the standout of my career. No, the Beatles films are just other films that he did. Hard Day's Night might be his best film, but I think he's a solid director who's done a lot of things. And I think here he manages to get what he wanted from it, I think, with like
more so than the Beatles, I would say. Yeah.
More so than the Beatles in this case, for sure, which I think maybe that conflict there is what leads this to feel so meandery, because it doesn't gel. But I think he does a good job managing what this movie is. And like you said, there's some stuff in here that's way more beautiful than I would have expected from a film like this.
Yeah.
So I'd give it a 1. I'd bump it to a
I
1.
think that's fair because I would probably give Hard Day's Night a 2 for directing.
Yeah.
Given the time, given the circumstances. Yeah, I think I would.
Yeah. All right. Next category is acting.
I'm also torn on this between a 0 and a 1.
Yeah, all the supporting actors do a very good job in
Better
their
than the Beatles,
performances.
I would say.
Better than the Beatles, and they're all actors. Like one of the guys, most of the people playing the Indian people are not Indian, unfortunately, but there are a couple of great British actors still in that group.
I think the main cultist guy is what is his name? John Bluthal. He does a fantastic job.
Yes, he does.
He does an amazing job.
But he doesn't play the main cultist guy.
Doesn't he?
No, it's Leo McKern. He plays Clang. Clang is the main cultist
Oh,
guy.
you're right. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. But he does do a great job. John Bluthal plays Puta, he's one of the other ones in that group. So, but yeah, the whole cast does a good job. The Beatles they're not good at acting, but them playing themselves, they're not bad at playing themselves. They're not good at acting, but they're not bad at playing themselves. I guess that's how I distinguish it, because I still enjoyed seeing them and just kind of being and doing their thing.
It is kind of telling that
different.
It is kind of telling that Ringo is the best actor among the Beatles. When like Ringo was not very charismatic of the Beatles. So
right. Richard Lester said that George Harrison was the best actor in A Hard Day's Night, so he wanted to feature him a little bit stronger here than he did there. But yeah, I do think that in the movie I agree that I think Ringo's the best actor. But yeah, I still enjoy watching them play themselves. I don't think they're like awful in the movie or anything.
No.
And it doesn't really matter too much that they're not great. They're just because, like I said, they're playing themselves. So yeah, acting. I'm tempted to give it a 1, just because I like this movie, and there's not a lot of things that I'm like jumping at giving 2s to it for.
Yeah, I think Eleanor Braun, I believe is how you pronounce her name, the woman who plays the woman who saves Ringo multiple times, and also Roy Kinnear is Algernon, who is my favorite in this movie, frankly.
Oh yeah,
he's so good
he's very good
as the Igor character. But I would say there are enough supporting actors in this one that push it over the top for a 1.
Yeah,
I'd say.
Okay. Visuals. How do you feel about visuals?
We did watch the remastered version, which I'll take into account. I think it's still good. At least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that there's some really great shots. I think the music videos,
especially for the 60s,
are all really well done. Yeah, especially for the
60s
music videos. Yeah, for sure. They having a movie budget to shoot some music videos also makes a difference too. So, and that they make use of that. So,
yeah, what was the budget for this movie like? 1.5 million is the estimated from IMDb. So, but let's see.
Yeah,
1.5 million is the budget listed for Wikipedia. So that makes sense. Yeah. Wait, 12.1 million is the estimated box office for Wikipedia. Where does it get that?
I saw that number. I saw that on Google, and I couldn't find anything that it linked to.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't know how true that number is, but I know it was, that was primarily in UK box office too. So, but yeah, I don't know specifically how much it made. We just don't have those hard numbers from that period of time.
I'm looking at the numbers web archive, and it says domestic box office, which would have been, I guess, the UK is 12.06 million. I think that's a number that we can go off of.
Yeah, it's just who knows how much it made any other places that it may have played and all the whatever else.
I
So
guess, yeah, and unless we just want to go, what did it make? Shrug. I don't know.
right, I just know that this movie was generally thought of as a hit.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Which 12 million
But
at the time in the 60s in the UK, that's a hit.
yeah,
So, yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
No, but back to visuals.
Then probably a one, I would say. Then like
I think a one is
I'd say
fair.
it's a decent one. You
Yeah.
know, it's not. Yeah, I don't think this movie on the filmmaking side is really getting to that two level. But speaking of the next category being editing, I also think editing's a one here.
Honestly, I'm gonna be honest. I think it's a zero.
You think it's a
I
zero?
do think it's a zero because the man does it meander around the editing
Yeah. Okay.
in
I
a
think,
way that's jarring, even for an absurdist movie.
the middle does slow down a bit more too, and I think that the editing in the music videos is much stronger than just in the
True.
regular
Oh,
film section.
true. Yeah. Oh man.
That's why I was tempted to give it a one, just because I think the
Yeah.
music video editing is good, but it's almost like the music videos are good and the rest of the film, like the editing just is what it is.
Yeah, from a movie perspective, it's really bad. It's like
Yeah.
it's rough, but yeah, you're right. The music video editing is quite good. I still want to give it a zero. Yeah,
Yeah, that's fine with me. Sound, I'll give sound a two because that's kind of
It's-
what this movie is selling the most.
that's the purpose.
Right. And so I, as a Beatles fan, I like hearing the Beatles music and it's used throughout.
And I'll still
there's
contend
not
that
really any-
the score surrounding it is not bad.
No, it's not bad either.
It's pretty decent.
Yeah, and the rest of the sound is what it is, but that's, you know, nothing's inaudible, you know? So you can hear everything, you can understand everything. I'm not saying it's like the best ever in that capacity, but it does the job. But the other stuff is really what's like specifically the Beatles music.
Was this movie dubbed? I know we talked
lifting
about
us.
Enter the Dragon and like that kind of dubbing.
I'm
but
sure there are scenes with ADR.
yeah,
in
because
it,
I think
but-
I suspect the scene at Stonehenge where they're having like the battle between the cultists and an entire British Army brigade.
Yeah. I'm sure there's plenty of ADR.
Yeah,
in
I think
this,
I think there's a decent amount of ADR, but I think it's done well. So
yeah, and all the music video sequences, I mean, those are going to be filmed without the audio in that kind of way because you record it.
It's
later.
all studio.
So yeah, it's all studio. Let's see, genre. I put it as jukebox musical / comedy.
I think it's more so a comedy.
I think so too. I'm willing to actually take out the jukebox musical and just say comedy.
Yeah. I think this is the exact kind of like musical comedy that Ishtar was trying to be.
If I'm just calling it a comedy, I'm kind of giving this a 2 because what I need a comedy to do is make me laugh, and I was cracking up the whole movie.
I'm with you there. I laughed a decent amount of times, more than I thought I would, and I've seen this movie a few times. So
yeah, this was my first time watching this one, and yeah, I was just there were points where I was dying. I was having a good time watching it. So it does what a comedy should do. It made me laugh. So yeah, it's a pretty strong 2 in that capacity.
Yep.
Impact, I'm not going to say it's a 0 because it's not, as far as film goes, this doesn't have a huge impact on film.
Yeah,
but
as far as just
kind
this film goes, I don't think it's a 0.
I think A Hard Day's Night obviously has a lot more influence and impact than this one did.
Yeah, I think A Hard Day's Night would be a 2. But
I cannot also deny that 1, the Beatles were insanely popular, and this was just kind of building on that, and 2, that this was, you know, kind of tied directly to the album, and it debuted several songs, several Beatles songs, not just no band, you know, just it's Beatles songs. So, like, I do think that just being a Beatles thing, it has some sort of cultural footprint still. So I would still give it a 1 here.
I think a 1 is fair.
Yeah. All right. So that is it for the categories. So that brings us to a total of, let's see,
9 out of 20.
Yep, 9 out of 20. Hey, that's a first for that score. So I think that's fair. If you're talking about the technical aspects of the film, the movie's not great. It's just, it is what it is. But I think the movie has still enough merits. I would definitely check it out if you like the Beatles, if you think if you like absurd comedies like Top Secret or Monty Python or whatever you want to list.
Oh yeah, if you like Airplane or Top Secret, this film is a lot like that.
Yeah, I would definitely just check it out. I'm not saying it's the best ever one of those, but I think it'll make you laugh.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's worth watching, even though it's technically not that strong of a film. So, but I had a good time watching it.
It's not that strong of a story, but yeah, as a comedy, it's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, but that'll do it for this discussion on Help.
What are we watching next week, buddy boy?
See, schedules are crazy, so you already know what we're watching next week because you've already watched it.
But yes, but the people at large
the people. Oh, the show. Got to keep the show together.
Yes, we take the movie and we give it back to you.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, but that being said, given that you already know, so whatever surprise that I do expect you to feign will be just that. We will be talking about a movie that's very personal to me in my love of film, and that is the 1982 sci-fi Disney film Tron.
Gasp! I never would have guessed.
No way. But I picked this was always going to be coming. I have a big Tron poster in my house. Tron is the first movie that I remember watching for the first time. So there are other things that I had seen before, but I don't remember like when those entered my life. Tron, I remember pointing at the TV and asking my mom, "What's that?" And then her kind of like loosely explaining it to me. And I was just like, I don't know, that just kind of took my mind somewhere else in a different way than
why, son, that's the dude. Before.
Yes, that's the dude, Jeff Bridges himself. So that's
bio digital jazz, man.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm excited to talk about the original Tron. I do love Tron Legacy too, but we're talking about the original tomorrow, whatever, next week. So yeah, but that'll do it for this week on Great American Movie Review. Once again, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. But yeah, that's me, Micaiah, and
Kyle.
That's where Kyle's supposed to say Kyle.
I did.
I don't know. We didn't rehearse. You did?
Yeah, I whispered it.
I didn't hear it, but nobody makes it to the end of the episodes anyway, so we're
I hit him with the asthma.
As is. But this chaotic ending is now over. We'll see you at the movies. Thanks for joining
us. Just like the chaotic ending on Help, 1965.